Joe's own party now wants him to throw in the towel and surrender the presidency after a single 90-minute performance. They want Crooked Joe out of the race. Tonight, I'm officially offering Joe the chance to redeem himself in front of the entire world.
More and more ditching Joe and co. The nonpartisan Cook Political Report shifting 6 states towards Trump in their latest electoral college rating system.
That includes 3 swing states, Arizona, Georgia, and Nevada, moving from toss-up to lean Republican.
And in the midst of the party's disorder, Democrats are urging Biden to salvage what he can and, most importantly, stop taking New York for granted as the president's lead shrinks to just 8 points in the progressive stronghold. Here now, live in studio, the wonderful, the fabulous Fox News contributor, Tammy Bruce.
Hello.
So, Tammy, there's all this conversation about Joe Biden getting out. They had a primary.
Yeah,
they say they care about democracy.
Right.
Joe Biden won the primary. Why are we having this conversation?
Yeah, well, you know, we wouldn't be if Donald Trump had been appropriately kneecapped.
Right.
If he was laying on the floor and they were dragging him to jail, everything would be fine. Biden would be doing algebra while doing cartwheels. He'd be the smartest man on earth. But no, that plan failed. And so now it's reality. But this is where it's very strange. You don't have this. It reveals how they take for granted and don't care about our system. The fact is that elections occurred. And they might not like the result. The fact is he is the president. I mean, we saw that election in 2020, 81 million votes. How is that you're going to shuffle that guy off to the side door because some people, some elites just decided that he's like not making it anymore and he's maybe will lose? That's called democracy. You have elections, people compete, and you either win or you lose. You don't get to switch somebody out. Even in Monopoly, you don't get to do that. No. You can't do it. And yet they're moving along like this is just a normal kind of thing. And obviously we know if their plan with Trump had worked, it's not about Biden's mental situation. It was the same in 2020. They would be fine with him right now. And this is why the Bidens should be furious, because they're looking around saying, we made a deal. You were going to protect us. You've known what his situation is. We know what is going on here. Why now are we the bad guys? And I like that he's saying nope, because he has nothing to lose at this point. If he's out of office, he is vulnerable, and so is the rest of his family. This was to save himself and his family, and now they're saying, oh, just get out. It's a remarkable display for the American people. It's certainly not democratic, to say the least. But it could lead, I hope, to a humiliating failure in November so this country can unite and get back on her feet.
Left-wing media, donors, Democrats, small and big, there can't be enough humiliation. Speaking of which, ho, media, and now Hollywood donors are turning their backs on Biden in a perfect storm just 25 days after hosting a fundraiser for the big guy. Actor George Clooney now comes out against Biden in a New York Times column titled, "I love Joe Biden, but we need a new nominee."
Aww.
Our own Hillary Vaughn was on Capitol Hill earlier today pressing Democrats about the Ocean's 11 star's timely switch-up.
I appreciate hearing Mr. Clooney's opinion, and we'll continue to deal with this within our Democratic family to make sure that we beat Donald Trump.
George Clooney is a movie producer. He needs to produce movies.
He said the guy he saw at the fundraiser, same guy he saw on the debate stage. So if Clooney has concerns about President Biden's mental fitness, do you?
I don't have concerns.
So George Clooney, you almost have to read this entire piece. He was perfectly aware of Biden's impairment, agedness, addledness before the debate. Then that was the one where Obama had to grab him by the arm, and then the White House said, oh, those are cheap fakes. You're making up. It's misinformation. Clooney is part of the cover-up. And it only started when everybody else, meaning the public, found out, and it meant that Biden might lose to Trump. What vacant, vacuous, craven people they are.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody really found out. It was, like in the movies, a suspension of disbelief, We were asked to, and we went along with it. Not us, of course, but various people. If you watch Fox Business, you watch Fox News, you were informed. And of course, these networks were excoriated for thinking and talking about the mental health and the physical health of the leader of the free world, God forbid. And so you were informed if you were watching this network. But people knew. And it was like, well, whatever it is for the cause was getting rid of Trump, who would actually set people free, and we can't have that. And so I think that this is the key, is that it wasn't really about realizing it. It was the opportunity. It was the excuse when the polls, but even with all the indictments separate from then the Supreme Court decisions and everything else, when it was clear the American people were not going to be schmucks again. We're not that way. We're still a young country, and we're revolutionaries, and we don't like being taken for granted. Ask the British. And so we're like, you're not going to do this to us. It's our families dying in Afghanistan. It's our loved ones being still held hostage in Israel, Americans, and nobody mentions their names. It's us. We're the ones who suffer. And it's enough is enough. So finally it was like, oh, that's the excuse now. But the fact is that they knew, and it was the numbers. They simply want to switch him out because he can't win. This is a life lesson. That's why lies never work. It may take a while, but they pile on, and it's a house of cards, and it will collapse. And they just thought if they could just squeak it through a little bit more, they would win, and they were wrong.
Clooney saw his incompetence and said nothing.
That's
when
correct.
America saw the incompetence, then he's like, oh, I'm going to tell everyone he should get out. And the big thing here is they saw the polling. In the polling, he's dropping, he can't win, and that's why they're telling him to get out, not because he's incompetent.
They can't even
which is
stand,
shameful.
they don't even stand for something. It's like looking at the list of like what other people listen to when you're getting your list, or what other people have bought, and then you buy that. It doesn't even matter. They stand for nothing. So if your favorite star tells you something, they don't know better. They're doing it because they're told to do it.
Yeah, who told him is the question.
Who told him? Barack Obama's my guess.
BHO,
Oh, yeah.
A staggering 24 hours has weakened President Biden's re-election bid as he faces what may be the most high-stakes pressure presidential news conference in modern history. And remember, today, we were supposed to be talking about Donald Trump being sentenced, but we're talking about the survival of President Biden politically. Just hours from now, Biden's set to give that solo news conference at the NATO summit as he fights to prove he is fit for office. Also this hour, Senate Democrats meeting with Biden's top advisors to vent their serious concerns about Biden's viability. And House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries is about to hold a news conference as fears surge through the Democratic Party that Biden will lose to Donald Trump in a historic GOP landslide. We'll take you to it when that happens at about 12:30. We've got a lot of breaking news. Buckle up, guys. Well, the stakes for Biden's solo appearance at the NATO summit are escalating by the hour as his support for his candidacy unravels. Supporters from Congress to Hollywood are all warning that he needs to step aside for the sake of the party. Meanwhile, new reporting by Politico reveals that former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, has suggested to people that Biden won't win this November and should step aside. Ouch. She's encouraging Democrats to speak out. We're also learning that former President Obama knew about George Clooney's devastating op-ed about Biden. Clooney reportedly told Obama what he was about to say, but Obama, he didn't shape what was going to be said, but he didn't try to stop him. Biden's desperately fighting to keep his job, and two of the most powerful and influential Democrats may not have his back. No. Bill, I think it's important just to pause for a moment before we get to all the Obama reporting and let it sink in that right now, during this hour, as of 3 weeks ago, we were supposed to be talking about Donald J. Trump being sentenced in a Manhattan courtroom just down the street. Instead, we are talking about the survival of Biden.
And that's been bumped to September, and who knows if it'll happen on the calendar for Judge Merchan in that month. I think you're very right about there's a lot of moving parts right now as we speak. I think the story is changing by the hour. The Jeffries announcement in the last hour that House Dems are going to meet again at some point, in addition to what he has to say at 12:30. You got the Biden staffers meeting with the senators to try and calm their nerves. You've got a memo that was just obtained by the Associated Press about Biden's path to victory. And they point to Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan as the clearest way to win again. And they also point out that no other challenger right now would outperform Joe Biden in the Democratic Party. I think that's significant. They're fighting on the inside of the campaign and as well as the White House. Hillary Scholten is a Democrat from Grand Rapids, Michigan. She represents Congressional District 3. That's Gerald Ford country. It's been Republican for a long time. Democrats took control of it, but it's still one of these swing districts. She just came out an hour ago and said Biden should step down. Gives you a little sense, I guess, of what she is thinking in a head-to-head race with her Republican challenger that's yet to be determined. They're going to have primary races later in the summer. Look at the Washington Post poll earlier today. Head-to-head registered voters, it's 46-46, all right? If I'm Biden, I'm like, hey, that's the good news. You go into that poll, you find 67% of all voters went in withdrawal, not just Dems. 85% of all voters think he's too old. And then you go into this a little later here. If you were to go with a backup plan, according to what ABC and the Washington Post has found, 29% among Democrats named Kamala Harris, all right? So she easily led everybody else in the group. But they had 30 candidates on this questionnaire. She's the only one in double digits. Everybody else was in single digits, what leads you to think if Biden drops out, how would they forge some sort of unanimous candidate before Chicago or even during Chicago?
A ton of questions there. And, you know, as you noted, the 10th House Democrat calling for him to step aside. Reports are there will be more. They're just waiting for foreign leaders to leave town and NATO to wrap up. So we'll see if that happens. And I think the big picture here, Tammy, as we look at this, you know, the story last week was the dam was breaking, and we saw Lloyd Doggett and, you know, all of these Democrats trickle out and say step aside. Then it was the dam is holding. It seemed like, at least in the front of cameras, House leadership was saying, look, we're in this. Pelosi saying this, Schumer saying this in the Senate. But then you get Clooney yesterday, and I think it was significant. And then you get what Pelosi said on Morning Joe, and I think it was significant. Made all the more significant when you read Politico Playbook today. We're told that he reached out, George Clooney, to former President Obama to give him a heads up. While Obama did not encourage or advise Clooney to say what he said, he also didn't object to it. We're told from people familiar with their exchange. They go on to say Pelosi's encouraging swing state Democrats, if you want to come out against Biden, do so. Wait for NATO.
Yeah. It's remarkable that while Clooney could call Obama and talk to him, he couldn't call Joe Biden. Right. He does this publicly. The public embarrassment and evisceration of the sitting president, like him or not, a man that they have supported literally with that fundraiser up to just a few weeks before, and then also condemned everyone who pointed out the condition of the president, including this network, calling it cheap fakes. And now everyone's saying, well, yeah, we knew. So the bigger issue here is, in addition to not just, not doing this publicly, but it's also about then condemning people who were trying to tell the truth about what was going on, that was their answer. Their answer was to smear and condemn as liars, as cheap fake makers, all of that. That's another element of that. That was what they went to. That was their goal. And so now, when it's clear, and the state is no, obviously, coincidence, all of this began with the Supreme Court decision about immunity. And then it was like, oh my God, our plan to kneecap Trump is going to fail. And so now Biden has to pay the price because the masters of the universe made a big mistake. No wonder the Bidens are furious and fighting this, and they should. And that's what I hope continues to happen, because everyone on the Democrat side deserves to be humiliated on November 5th so that this does not happen again.
You know, Emily, yesterday we were discussing Pelosi coming out on Morning Joe saying we're all waiting for Biden to make a decision. Oh, wait, he's made a decision. He said it repeatedly. You may not like the decision. Then she put out another statement saying she'd been mischaracterized. The statement said, we're waiting for Biden to make a decision. So the same thing she said to Joe Scarborough. But what's interesting is how carefully calculated Pelosi was. Politico saying she carefully ironed out what she wanted to say on Morning Joe, Biden's appointment viewing, keeping Democrat leaders abreast of her intentions. These comments were meant to serve as a subtle green light so that other members could come forward with their candid remarks. All of this is being calculated behind the scenes.
Oh, 1,000,000%. Yes, of course. And Pelosi has demonstrated for years that nothing comes out of her mouth without a calculated and a calculable intent and motive behind it. Look, here's the thing. So George Clooney comes out yesterday with this totally embarrassing, published op-ed. To your point, there is no way that he decided at his own kitchen table to do that. Right. Someone told him to do that. Either fundraisers, we want our money back, make it happen, or maybe Obama, and this report of that conversation might or might not be accurate. But at the end of the day, he became their figurehead. And this is in the wake of, as we spoke with former Speaker McCarthy, saying they don't have a leader. So here's what that entails, or here's what that shows to me, is that none of any of them have any type of spine to be that leader themselves. Pelosi subtly encouraging people to come out. Why don't you just come out and say it? Because instead you get George Clooney to do it. You have someone who is insulated and safe in Hollywood do your bidding for you. What about the bidding of the commander-in-chief for the last 4 years to the detriment and the loss of 13 American servicemen's lives and all our allied relationships, not to mention the million Ukrainians? What about the Israeli? I mean, the list goes on. So yes, they are complicit in the cover-up, these media figures, but also more so the Democratic Party figureheads and actors behind the scenes that have blessed this weird coup and now have their arms up. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I'm popping popcorn, but we do not have in the bag. So at the end of the day, there is nothing to put your feet up about GOP. It is important that everyone votes still, because no matter what, whether he backs out, whether they have another candidate in place or they continue in the war of the five kings, it is up to us to have that solidarity in November.
Michelle, here's what I'm interested in tonight. I actually think Biden's going to do better than expected, and here's why. I've stood at a podium and done press conferences. I've also been in hostile interviews. Hostile interviews are harder than press conferences. Here's why. There's one microphone at a press conference, and the White House staff will control the second microphone in front of the reporter. They can let the reporter ask the question, take it away. Very little back and forth. They can maintain this. ABC George Stephanopoulos, you can't maintain. You've got someone grilling you. There are two microphones. So I think he will do well tonight. The low bar, well, for Joe Biden. And I'm curious to see what happens after. Do Democrats take this as a signal? Okay, let's pull back the drafts we have of our statements as reported by Politico. Or do they say, we still don't believe he can win?
Well, it's amazing that we are watching every physical move that he makes, every word that comes out of his mouth. Because now, just like in that scene in The Wizard of Oz, the curtain got pulled back on The Wizard of Oz. We see who's at the controls, and we're not very confident in that human being. So we're watching every move, we're listening to every word, and slowly but surely, these various people are saying, he should withdraw, or I'm with Joe. They're all biding their what? They're biding their time. They think they have time to resuscitate him, or they think there's time to find a new candidate. But here's what irks me as an American. What about the time that we're passing right now and the danger this country is in, because we don't know who's running the ship, who has their hands on the steering wheel, not just for the next 4 months, but for the next 4 minutes. Things are changing hourly, things are changing every minute. And what's irking to me is that, yes, there are these subtle people. My state of Minnesota, Angie Craig came out and said he should step down. Everyone's playing it safe based on what works for them. And what about what works for us?
Jesus, take the wheel.
Great question. Jesus, take the wheel. That's a Carrie Underwood song.
Yes, it is.
All right.
Meanwhile, there was another bombshell. Axios reporting that behind closed doors, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has told donors he is open to a Democratic ticket that is not led by President Biden. Here now is Axios political reporter Hans Nichols. Great to have you, Hans, and what a scoop that you got. Tell us what you heard.
Well, thanks for having me. I want to be very clear about what we reported and how far we went. And the basic idea here is that Chuck Schumer is open to the idea of having someone other than Joe Biden be atop that ticket. He's not actively advocating for a swap, but he's listening to all his donors, his allies, and he's also having this big listening session with members of his own caucus, the Senate Democrats that make him majority leader. And yes, a lot of Democrats want to defeat Donald Trump, and that's very important to Democrats. But Chuck Schumer loses his job as Senate Majority Leader if the Senate loses their 51 seats. And so that's why this is so crucial to see what he's doing. He's mostly been silent, right? He's been giving this statement, I'm for Joe. He's now said that 4 times, at least in my presence. What we don't know is where he's truly at, and this is an indication that he's at least open to something.
Okay, but you write that, and you say in private he's singing a different tune. Just clear that up.
It's just, well, in public, there is no doubt, there's no daylight in public between Chuck Schumer and the president of his own party, with whom he served a decade in the Senate and then got to know pretty well when Biden was vice president, right? No public daylight. Privately, there's daylight. And that is to say that he is open, Chuck Schumer, to someone not named Joe Biden being on the ticket. Again, he's not sort of pushing these conversations. He's not, but he is using and listening to his allies and his donors and the senators.
He is meeting the donors where they are. And then you had the NBC report say that the money is drying up for the campaign. The money dries up for the campaign. You can't pay your staffers. You don't have a campaign. But Ron Klain, the former chief of staff, he did an interview with Greg Sargent. Here's some of the things he said about Biden's undecided voter support remaining strong.
I don't think they're moving towards Trump. I think they're parked under undecided in most of these polls, maybe parked under Kennedy in some polls. But I think those voters are gettable by Biden. If you're one of these, let's say, white working class voters in Pennsylvania, and you aren't Trumpy yet, I don't see how you're getting Trumpy in the next 4 months. And I think those people may just, not be wild about the prices of things and inflation and things like that, and have doubts about Biden's management of that. I think those are unfair, but I think I acknowledge they exist.
Hans, can you tell me, what is the feeling in D.C.? Because I'm not there. I mean, I have my sense from where I am now based on like a little bit of experience there. But what's the feeling there? To me, like the campaign that the Biden team is trying to wage is a failing one, and they're flailing, and this press conference can't save them. But what say you?
I think it's just tense. I think everyone is waiting to see, at least for Senate Democrats and House Democrats, there's a great deal of tension heading into this press conference. Look, Ron Klain laid it out there. That's their theory of the case. It's also a hypothetical one. And what Klain and the Democratic Party and the president are essentially asking House and Senate Democrats is to take their word for it, that these voters may come back to Biden, that they may just be a little bit upset about inflation. All that is conditional. And so what you have here is basically two different theories of the case. Voters are either going to come back to Biden or they've lost him. And Klain and Biden are saying, trust us. And what you're hearing, a growing chorus on Capitol Hill, is we're not so certain and we want more evidence. And I think that's what the next 24, 48 hours are about.
Hans, isn't it pretty obvious that it's really the Obama circle that's doing most of the pushing here?
That's clear on the aide side. When you look at former aides, the sort of core people that I got to know when I covered the Obama White House, they are all publicly saying what a lot of Democrats in this town and some in the administration or close to the administration are saying privately, which is say it is going to be very difficult for Joe Biden to beat Donald Trump if he continues to have the kind of debate performances that he had, and if he's not actually up to either the job or running for president. But you're right, like that's the story. Bill, you've just turned yourself into my assignment editor. That's the story I should get. We should try to figure out where Obama is privately, and then after that, I'll try to figure out where Julia Roberts is. Because she hasn't said anything.
Yeah, can I add this as your assignment editor? I think the biggest story in America is who is texting and emailing John King and Van Jones during that debate. Because they struck that match as soon as that 90 minutes was concluded, and it has changed the story entirely ever since. So we'll get on that too.
Hans, thank you.
Thanks for coming on.
Kneecapped, kneecapped. Vacuous, vacuous. Craving, craving. Excoriated, excoriated. Schmucks, schmucks. Viability, viability. Unravels, unravels. Abreast, abreast. Subtle, subtle. Candid, candid. Entail, entail. Complicit, complicit. Solidarity, solidarity. Resuscitate, resuscitate.
If you enjoy this content, please consider subscribing to my channel to stay up to date with future videos. Thank you for watching.